Welcome to The Secret Truth. We're at the JFK conference in Dallas, Texas, 2017, being produced by Judith Very Baker. And to my left is Andrew Kreig. He's based in Washington, D.C., is a public affairs commentator, author, attorney, and legal reformer with decades of experience in cutting-edge public policy issues. Welcome to our program, Andrew Kreig.
George, it's such a pleasure and honor to be back with you and talk about the secret truths happening and being unveiled here and now.
You get in all kinds of issues over the years, is that right, in the Washington, D.C., and political and very wide views and issues. Is that true?
Well, exactly. And just to set the scene and time and place, my office is on Pennsylvania Avenue in downtown Washington, D.C., halfway between the White House and Congress. And to fix it a little more geographically, only as I look on Pennsylvania Avenue where they have the inauguration parades, to my right about 4 blocks is the Trump Hotel where so much is going on, and to my left about 4 blocks is the federal courthouse where right now the FBI special prosecutor have just presented major indictments just a few weeks ago. So that's historically my focus is on current affairs, but we have to know history. We have to know what you would call the secret truths to understand what's going on today elsewhere.
Well, you're right at the heart of the swamp, as Trump described it. I mean, you over the years, you've met quite a few different people, haven't you?
Well, I still do, and I won't get into name dropping, but I've been active in Washington as head of a nonprofit group in the high-tech area, attorney and journalist for a quarter century.
Well, we're presently at the JFK Conference 2017 at the Crowne Plaza Hotel, being produced by Judith Very Baker. And you just spoke early this morning, I believe. And what are your views after the release of all these archives just recently?
Well, I would say the secret truth is that we're being misled again by the mainstream media, of which I've been a part for many years. They make us think that if we can't find a smoking gun, these document releases are not important. Or conversely, they confuse us by elevating trivia as distractions in the documents. Now, I track this all very closely. I administer the websites of several organizations, including Citizens Against Political Assassinations, CAPA, the leading JFK and other researchers into assassinations, and also the Justice Integrity Project, which has readers' guides to both the JFK, Martin Luther King, and Robert Kennedy assassinations. So I track the minutia, but here's a big picture just as an overview, and we can dig into the details. We already know what happened in outline. So we have basically a jigsaw puzzle with a few missing pieces, but we've previously had 4 million pages of declassified documents. We have 2,500 books on this topic. We have, at a great conference like this, we have many living witnesses still living to talk about what happened. So the documents fill in part of the jigsaw puzzle, but anybody who wants to look at it knows what happened. It was a conspiracy. Oswald did not fire a fatal bullet. You can get distracted on details like who pulled the triggers, multiple triggers, what precisely his role was. I think it was largely patsy, but people can reasonably differ on whether he knew anything or not. He was undoubtedly a government agent acting as kind of a spy in a sense. We know that. And it's disinformation to believe that in this or any other assassination, somebody's going to write an incriminating memo and then have the government release it. People do not plan assassinations by memos.
By public announcements, right? Yeah, today we're gonna assassinate JFK. Well, you really have some keen insights. Where were you on the day that JFK was assassinated? Can you remember back?
Well, I can, and I have two things hopefully interesting to say about it.
Okay.
One is I was in a history class at my high school in New York City, and of course we were all shocked then, and only a few years later, John F. Kennedy Jr. would attend my school. So there's something poignant in that. I'm a few years older than President Kennedy's son, of course, and so I was in a high school class. The specific school is the oldest school of any kind in the United States. It's called Collegiate School. My graduating class had about 32 students or so. And a year or two later, Jacqueline Kennedy would bring her son and watch our football practices in Central Park.
Oh, really? This was a very exclusive school, then, was it not?
Oh, yes. So she picked that school.
But I mean,
attend.
you got a good education, didn't you?
I got a great education, and here but not so good that I got immediately involved in this assassination research, because as I pursued a career in first journalism,
right,
and then law, like many Americans, but particularly those in the professions, let's call it, of journalism and law, I accepted the Warren Report, and I was too busy advancing my career to go beyond it until fairly recently. So even with the relationship, one step removed, with the Kennedy family there, I didn't dig into it until recently. By the way, I got to tell an embarrassing story, but maybe something that I can admit after all these years. But it shows what young people are like, including young people in the media. When Jacqueline Kennedy was touring the school with the head of it, the Dean Carl Andrews, me and a couple of my friends were we'd in effect playing hooky from one of our last classes in the gym, and we were horsing around.
Okay.
And I had a volleyball.
Okay.
That I was playing almost like impromptu dodgeball.
Just horsing around, right?
Horsing around. So,
having a good time.
So I
Yeah.
threw the volleyball.
Yeah.
And it suddenly, in the doorway, came the head of the school.
Oh,
with
my God.
Jacqueline Kennedy.
Really?
And the volleyball. Hold still, George.
Okay.
I don't want to do anything bad here.
Okay.
The volleyball went approximately this far from her nose.
Oh, my God. That's a surprise, wasn't it?
And here we were, having left our French class.
And how soon would that have been after the assassination?
That probably would have been 1965.
Oh, okay.
And so
it was a couple of years after.
And
something like
she
that.
was getting a tour of the school.
Oh, I see.
And
okay.
and so she would later send John to the school.
Oh, I see. Oh, well,
John
it was an exclusive.
And if that
Man.
ball had hit her in the head, I probably would have been thrown out of the
Hey, Andrew,
school.
you could have changed history.
I could have. No, but so.
Well, that's an interesting
well,
story.
the head
man.
of the
It
school
is.
was not happy with me. He kind of gives me a look. And what he didn't know was that we used to set the clock ahead in our French class.
Yeah.
Because it was the last class before gym break, and so I sometimes joke with reality that after years of French, one of the few complete sentences I knew was, Monsieur le Professeur, la cloche a sonné, which means the clock has sounded. And the very dedicated teacher would look down at his notes, and he hadn't gotten through the whole plan, but he'd look up at the clock and he said, well, class is over, and then we'd start horsing around. But I tell that story on myself, not purely to go along with the secret truths. This is the first time I've ever told this story.
Well, that's a beautiful story.
Under
Andrew.
your relentless interrogation.
Hey, that spices up an interview. That's for sure.
Well, here's one other thing.
Yeah,
one of the
ahead.
people that I was doing it with was my co-captain in basketball, who went on to become a very famous media entrepreneur. And you just did a fist bump. Well, son, before there was a fist bump,
right,
there was a high five.
Oh, yeah,
and we like to say that we invented the high five there.
Okay.
And here's how that happened. Do you want to hear that?
Yeah, yes, go ahead.
Well, there was a great movie around that time called Breathless, starring the John Paul Belmondo. And again, my friend Robert F.X. Sillerman and I were again playing hooky, and we went and saw that movie. And when Belmondo gets out of prison, let's do a high five here.
Okay.
He's with your right hand.
My hand is sort of bad hand.
Well, he gets out of prison after 5 years, and he goes like that.
Okay.
And so Bob Sillerman and I were co-captains of our high school basketball team.
Yeah.
And this became our gesture every time we'd go out on the town and play a game. And we had a game back in those days before sports became big time. So our high school played in Madison Square Garden before a New York Knickerbockers NBA game. And it was a doubleheader. And it had Wilt Chamberlain playing for the Philadelphia Warriors. It had the New York Knicks and all these guys, and they were playing before our high school game, Collegiate versus Fieldson. And we won that game by 1 point, our high school game, and the pro players came out, and as they waited to come on, they saw us doing these.
Oh, they did. They gave.
And
well, that's interesting.
And so we've looked it up, and there was no high five before that.
Okay.
And Bob Sillerman.
Well, y'all started that then.
Bob Sillerman went
indeed.
on to become a huge mogul. He acquired the promotion rights, among many other things, for Elvis Presley from the Presley family, for Muhammad Ali. He was co-promoter of the most successful Broadway play, The Producers.
Okay.
He helped start the show. Drawing a blank on it. I think American Idol.
That's it.
And so he would be interviewed on his fabulous career in the sports and entertainment business, and he would tell the story here.
Really? That's good.
About the invention of the high five. So I'm jumping around, but here's something, and I've fallen into it. Of where were you? And that's a great question, and I'd love to tell this story for the first time, but the important story is what actually happened,
right?
And why is it important today,
right?
And I think the psychological war experts who are very involved in these assassinations understand that we're egocentric, many of us, including, unfortunately, yours truly, and we can get diverted into the egocentric question of where were you?
Yeah.
And a friend of mine actually wrote a book about it, Gus Russo, and his entire book is where you were. And what that omits is what happened and what are the lies and the secret truths involved in that story.
Okay.
And the psychological warfare experts who are involved in the cover-up, and that you and your team are fighting to this day by unveiling the secret truths. They know that we get easily diverted, whether it's the high five story, the volleyball, or the nose, and but and the purpose of this conference, and of course your great and courageous truth-telling, is what really happened, though? And that was the purpose of my talk today, to not to try not to get diverted, even though we all do it, but to say this is important. They took our president and killed him in broad daylight, and we've got to help keep the public focused on that and why it's important today.
Yes, I think that's a very, very, very good statement there, and I would certainly agree with that 100%. So we're teaching the younger people, hopefully, about government and how tyrannical governments can become.
Well, yes, but it's a challenge because I'm located right now in right downtown Washington, as I've mentioned, and there's 20 million visitors a year, mostly young people, on school tours to Washington, D.C. And I recently went on some of the tours. I have some younger relatives, and I realize it's entertaining in effect, but it's also, George, and to your audience, it's in many ways almost a propaganda.
Yes, it is. It is. It's a system of continuing a dominance of a system of thought through propaganda to some extent.
Yes.
And they mix in some truths because they have to bring the propaganda to justify the propaganda part.
And I'll just add that I've had probably about 5 careers in media, law, politics, and so forth. And I'll just say, for those who don't understand how it works, that let's say 98% of the people in these sectors don't realize that they're tools of propaganda.
Yes, I understand.
It wouldn't work.
Yes, I understand.
They simply
we're controlled to a great extent by our thoughts and ideas, and we're structured by government and other institutions. So we've been institutionalized to a certain degree.
Well, exactly, and so as partly an apology for my earlier story, I'll say the relevance is here. I had this almost close contact with the Kennedy family, as I mentioned, and as a reporter covering courts, the law, as a lawyer, and I wasn't involved in this because I simply assumed that the Standard story was accurate, and I probably made fun of conspiracy theorists and so forth, but the press of national and current events got me about 7 years ago to start digging into this, and I've since done so with such a passion because I realize it makes a lie out of my career and that of so many others if we don't dig into this as you've done and so many people here for so many years.
I've been on to this thing since it occurred. I didn't fully understand what was going on for years, just like yourself and others, but I eventually began to catch on. Well, I want to thank you for being with us this evening here at the JFK conference in Dallas, Texas, in 2017, and really appreciate some of your insights.
Well, George, if we have at least 20 or 30 seconds, I'd like to conclude by what people can do.
Sure, go ahead.
Because there are very specific things that people can do. One is I've tried to do a free reader's guide to this on the justice-integrity.org website of where people can look at the books from all different perspectives, educate themselves.
And you could find that at andrewkreig.com.
Yes.
Kreig, andrewkreig.com on the web.
That's one place.
Okay. What would be another one?
Another is the Justice Integrity site, and the other is CAPA, Citizens Against Political Assassinations, which encompasses many different.
Yeah, I worked with John Judge before up here years ago.
Well, that's great, and we miss him.
I've had him on the program. I've forgotten what year. Would it 2007 or 8 or something like that?
Well, we miss him so much, but here's the last and important point.
Yeah.
And again, I'm almost violating it, but I would ask each person to be the media, and that was the concluding part of my talk just a
Okay.
few minutes ago. We cannot rely on the mainstream media, so we need to support programs like yours,
Okay.
which is actually unique. But and to spend part of our time each week doing what we can locally at libraries, organizing events, bringing in
Heart
speakers,
to heart, face to face.
face to face,
Telling the story about
telling a
what
story,
really went on.
and
That-
and
yeah.
to advocate
Yes.
on social media
Sure.
sites like yours.
That's right.
So
Facebook, whatever
We,
we can
are
use.
the media. Do not be
Yeah.
waiting for some savior. I work with these people in Washington and elsewhere, and have for 45 years. Most of them are clueless, as I was, and they're busy. So we've got to take the lead and be the media.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Andrew Kreig, for being with us this evening.
It's my honor.